In iOS 13 and later, apps can access directories that are outside of the app sandbox, and the app can save a bookmark to that location. In this project, we're going to allow the user to select multiple folders and save them using bookmarks. In content-view.swift, add some UI to show a list of folders or directories and a button to open the document picker so the user can add a new folder to the list. For now, I'll add some dummy data so we can get an idea of what it will look like. We need a state variable. It starts off as false. And it'll add some placeholder text in the sheet. It should look like this and open a sheet when you tap the button. Apple has a documentation page called Providing Access to Directories, and it says the framework is UIKit. This is important because there are some things that Swift can't do yet. And according to a video I found on Hacking with Swift called Wrapping a UI View Controller in a Swift UI, you need to learn to talk UIKit if you want to add more advanced functionality. The whole video is great and worth the watch. He explains that to wrap a UIKit view controller, we have to create a struct that conforms to the UI View Controller Representable protocol. On the UI View Controller Representable page, it says, use a UI View Controller Representable instance to create and manage a UI View Controller object in your Swift UI interface. So let's do that. Create a new Swift file called documentpicker.swift and make a struct named documentpicker that conforms to UI View Controller Representable. You have to import Swift UI. Xcode will say that it doesn't conform. Take its suggestion and let it add the protocol stubs. It will add a line that says type alias, UI View Controller equals type. Change the type to UI Document Picker View Controller. Then Xcode will still say that it doesn't conform. Take its suggestion again to add protocol stubs. This time it will add two methods, make UI View Controller and update UI View Controller. Notice that the return type of make UI View Controller is UI Document Picker View Controller. Now you can delete the type alias line because Swift can figure out the type from the return type of the function. Delete the code placeholder from update UI View Controller because although we have to have this function to conform, we don't need to do anything with it. Inside make UI View Controller, we need to add some code to return a UI Document Picker View Controller. On the Providing Access to Directories article, it has this code to ask the user to select a directory. But all we need to do is make the document picker and return it. Now that we have a document picker struct, which is a valid SwiftUI view, you can use it in content-view.swift. Replace the placeholder text in the sheet with document picker. When you run the app and tap on the button, it should open the document picker. But when you select a folder, it does nothing except dismiss the sheet. This is because we aren't receiving any information about which document the user selected. To do this, we need to use a coordinator. Back on the UI View Controller Representable page, it says, when you want your view controller to coordinate with other Swift UI views, you must provide a coordinator instance to facilitate those interactions. And under Topics, there's a section called Providing a Custom Coordinator Object that mentions a function called makeCoordinator. Add a makeCoordinator method to the document picker struct that returns a coordinator. Add a nested coordinator class and inside makeUIViewController, assign the coordinator to the document picker delegate. Since we are assigning an instance of the coordinator class to the document picker delegate, it must conform to UI document picker delegate, and because of that, it must conform to NS object. Now we need to make the coordinator actually do something when the user picks a document. On the UI document picker delegate page, there's a function called document picker, did pick documents add. There's also a deprecated function that returns just one URL instead of an array. Don't accidentally use that one. The easiest way to add this to your code is to start typing did pick, then select the correct one. For now, add a print statement. When you run the app and select a folder, it will print out a URL to the console in Xcode. For example, when I select a folder called Finances, it looks like this. Next, we need to save this URL to a bookmark instead of printing it to the console. What is a bookmark? According to Apple's documentation on bookmarks, it's a piece of data that you can convert a security scoped URL into. You can then convert a bookmark back into a security scoped URL later. Why not just store the plain URL? Well, a bookmark lets you find the current location of the URL even if the user moves or renames the resource, or if the user relaunches your app or restarts the system. Let's make a new Swift file called bookmarkcontroller.swift. Inside of this file, make a class that conforms to observable object so that it can publish an array of URLs for the Swift UI view to use. To add this to the environment, go back to the bookmark directories app.swift and add an instance of this class to the environment. Most of the code we need for the add bookmark function is on the providing access to directories page under save the URL as a bookmark. But we need to add a few other things like creating a UUID for the file name, getting the location to save the bookmark, and adding the URL to the URLs array. Don't need ability to. I added a private helper method to get the app sandbox directory, which is where we store the bookmark files. I'll use that here. When you append the URL to the array, you can wrap that in a with animation block so that it will animate into view. We have to import Swift UI because of the with animation line. The function should look like this now. Now, in the document picker.swift, it can use the bookmark controller to save the directory that the user picked. First, add an environment object at the top of the struct. Since the nested coordinator class doesn't have access to the bookmark controller's properties, we need to give it access. To give it access, make an initializer for the coordinator that takes a document picker as an argument and pass in self when making the coordinator. Then, instead of printing the URL, we can call parent.bookmarkcontroller.addBookmark. Now when you run the app and select a folder, if you look in the app sandbox directory, using an app like OpenSim makes this easy, you'll see that it creates a file. You can even open it with a text editor if you want to see the contents of the file. It will have some text that mostly looks like gibberish, but you'll see the URL in there if you look closely. To show the bookmarks to the user, access the bookmark controller as an environment variable. Add @environment object var bookmark controller to the top of the content view struct, and pass a new bookmark controller to the content view in the preview. Then use the for each to show each URL in the list. When you run the app and add a folder, it will show up in the list. But when you restart the app, it won't be there. That's because we're never loading up the existing bookmarks when the app starts. Another problem is that our preview in Xcode now shows 0 folders, and I want to be able to preview what it would look like in the app. Let's fix both of those problems. To load up the existing bookmarks into the URLs array, we need to write a load all bookmarks function in our bookmark controller. It needs to get all the bookmark files from our app sandbox directory, loop over all of them using compact map, and for each of them, add the URL into the URLs array. On the Providing Access to Directories page, it has a code snippet for getting the URL from a bookmark. Return nil, contents of file. See, we're getting the URL here. And down here, we need to return an empty array if that is nil. And return nil here. We don't need that variable. To call this function when the app starts, let's call it in the bookmark controller's initializer. That works great, but it doesn't help with our preview. We can add a parameter with a default value to optionally load some dummy data for the preview. Then in the content view preview code, you can have one preview with fake data and one without. When you open the app, it will load up the existing bookmarks and you can add more. A big thanks to my friend Elaine who helped me figure all of this out. Next time I'll show you how to delete bookmarks and how to show their contents when you tap on one.